Jupiter 17 conference, and my name is Vasily Tolstoy. I'm a member of the programming committee of the conference, and here is Mr. Stephen Hemminger from Microsoft, as I can see. We have met before and even filmed it, but let's play that it didn't happen for a while. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Stephen Hemminger. I work as a Linux developer for 7 or 8 years, and been working at several companies. And the last year and a half, I've been at Microsoft, with the Linux on Azure Hyper-V.
Great. You were giving a talk at this conference.
I did.
So can you? I understand that the half hour talk takes like 5,000 words. Can you do it in 50 words for us? What's all about?
I would just use the simple thing which was announced on the press release yesterday, which I was actually surprised at, that on the Azure cloud, we're now up to 40% of the instances are running Linux.
Oh.
So given that, Linux is very important to Microsoft and very important to our customer success. And then I went into all the technical things that we had done to make that successful.
Which is good. Okay, so the usual question, which we cannot skip, is what's your opinion? What interesting had happened last year?
Well, what's interesting that's happened in the last year is actually maturing of things that happened the year before, which is the usual case. So a lot of at least in the world I am in Linux networking, that's maturity of both data plane development kit side, and then also it's the maturity of the XDP, which is the allowing you to program small programs in the kernel, which several people have used to provide useful functions like denial of service prevention, routing to containers, things like that.
What do you think? Is there any hype at this moment? Something which everybody is talking about, something which is really the new great thing, they're disrupting something, or is
well, a lot of times people that are very involved see technologies and they see things along the classic Gartner curve of something that's being hyped and then something that's in its shakedown phase and then eventually matures. And I think containers are just on the edge to being in the mature phase. So there's a lot of hype about containers, and there's also a lot of people exploring containers, and they're only just starting to find the really useful, unique uses for them. So I mean, at least in the enterprise. This is probably going to upset all the bleeding edge technology people who say, oh yes, this is great and wonderful, but from my experience and hearing from people, they're just starting to get involved in using it.
I guess we share this feeling, okay, because I'll agree with you.
I mean, just the hype is bigger than the deployment is basically the...
Usually it is. My next question is not that technical. The community, the Linux community, is getting older because we're getting older.
Right.
It all started as a student project as well, but that Mr. Torvalds is not a student anymore.
Yeah.
And we are not, unfortunately. The maintainers of a lot of subsystems, they're quite experienced guys. So what's your opinion on that? Is there any problem? Or not? If it is, how we overcome it? What are the consequences?
I used to be more worried about it a few years ago than I am right now. And the reason I'm not as worried about it is I see a lot of people coming in and contributing. The majority of Linux contributions come from developers in companies, and most of those companies have a very diverse workforce over a range of ages and geographies, and they may not be as visible as the maintainers, but they're doing the bulk of the contributions. So we get a lot of students, a lot of people, a lot of new developers coming in all the time. I'm more worried that how do we make people that come into the community want to stay with the community and stick with it? Do we have the things that they want to do? Do we have the ways to keep them involved? Do we have ways to make the ones that are skilled at doing maintainer work become maintainers? I mean, kind of like how do you rotate or get people into those roles where it's needed?
Yes, and it was actually it's great you have answered the part of my next question. What do you think? Is there any necessity to, well, let's say it, lure people in the community, or it's just all the people who are inclined to do this kind of job are automatically coming in? It's like internal urge. You have born and prodigy child, whatever. So you just sit and wait when people flow in. And if there is a need to facilitate this coming into community, doing contribution, how it should be done?
Well, to get the community to grow requires a good way to introduce people to it, so enough documentation and mentoring and hand-holding and understanding, but it also requires the community to be receptive and to embrace new ideas and new people. And like any other community, we have challenges on both areas. We have lots of documentation and we have lots of programs to get people in. But how do you get the right people connected with that? And as far as being more embracing of people, we are, but it's a challenge. It really is a challenge for people to overcome. Just even from social things. I mean, many people come from cultures and areas where they aren't used to interacting with a large group, and they aren't used to getting feedback from a large number of people, and it's very difficult for them.
I think we can continue this issue for a long time, but it would be not the short interview, but a very interesting discussion. Probably we should do it, but not now, unfortunately. Yeah. What can I say about the following? Are there any books or videos or conference materials, any other substantial and nameable, in a sense, material which everybody definitely should get hands-on, learn, or at least see once? Something
I would say,
which you recommend to anybody?
I would recommend, there's one of my friends who has produced a lot of material and on very many different topics, and really useful to learn is Paul McKinney, who works for IBM, has written a lot of things about RCU and memory ordering and caches and all those kind of deep technical dive topics that every developer needs to at least have a background in, just like any physicist needs a background in basic math. Anybody in computer science getting into this really needs to understand that. And if you can understand that, things look a lot easier. You can start to understand things from it. So I think that's kind of like, maybe I'm not doing it anymore. It's been years since I was in college, but I would imagine that's the kind of thing they're teaching in graduate schools now, but not everybody gets exposure to that in their schooling.
Great, thank you. Going in the same direction. If let's imagine that everybody who is slightly interested in getting into Linux development or basically understand how the community works is watching this YouTube clip, and you can address those people and say something to them. What it would be?
The most important thing, surprisingly, as a developer, is to use your eyes and to ask questions of, why is this doing that? I was seeing something, this doesn't look right. I plugged a USB stick in and it didn't mount, and I see these messages, or when I boot my Wi-Fi isn't working. All those kinds of things following through on it. The average person just kind of, oh well, it's just a problem and whatever, I rebooted.
The thing is broken.
Yeah, the thing is broken. But the person that wants to get involved digs a little deeper, finds the community, makes contacts, feeds the information, gets involved, feedback, and that problem gets resolved, and they build a lot of contacts and other connections.
Sure. So, dear boys and girls, if your mama will catch you connecting two tin cans to grab the Wi-Fi from the nearby local store, tell mommy that Mr. Hemminger told you to do so.
Or, I mean, let even go further. You know, I've been involved in the buffer bloat area, which I did last year, and a lot of that work was done by doing open source firmware for Wi-Fi routers. So, I'm not telling you to go take your Wi-Fi router from your parents and reprogram it with open source firmware, but if you go to the store or you find one from a friend and you want to get involved, that's a great way to get involved too.
So we can I guess we can let boys and girls to meet with their parents by themselves. That still you have this great recommendation. You're not alone. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.